Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our continuing series, the Unported playlist. Today we're taking a look at Armed Police Batrider, which is a strange title, I admit it, released in 1998 by Raizing. And if you take a look at arcade shmups, so many of them have not been ported over. The arcade scene is littered with amazing shmups, shooting games, whatever you want to call them, that have just never been ported home, and this is definitely one of them. As far as emulation is concerned, I definitely recommend it. I've been able to find 2 boards that sold on eBay in the last 6 months. One sold for $700 and one sold for $1,400, which as far as rare shmups are concerned really isn't that bad. If you get into some of the cave games, they're $3,000–$4,000 a pop. So I would say that while that sounds like a large number, for shmups it's not huge, but it's definitely not something that I collect that much, so emulating it works perfectly fine for me. Interestingly enough, the game takes place in 2019, which was last year, so it's always fun just to kind of play those sort of sci-fi games that pick a year that are very close to the one you're living in. But as far as gameplay is concerned, it is your traditional shmup. There's a lot of good challenge to it. I take a death right off the top because I wasn't paying attention, but the graphics, the sprites, everything that goes into it makes it feel like a really good experience. And that's the issue with a lot of these shmup games, is that you never got a chance to play them at home. I don't know if this was ever brought over to the US, I can't find a record of it. There's just a ton of Japanese shoot-'em-up games that were never brought over to the US, never ported to any console, or sometimes they were ported to something weird like the FM Towns Marty. In one of my previous series, I talked about one of the shmups on that platform that only ever got ported to it, so it makes it an extremely rare release. But as far as the gameplay in general is concerned, it is really good. There's a lot of challenge to it. Now there's a couple different ways to play. There's an advanced course, and then there's the regular course. And on that advanced course, you're going to get some more bosses and things such as that. And that's kind of traditional for shoot-'em-up games, is that there's more than one way to play, or sometimes there's additional stages that you can't play unless you achieve a certain feat, if you play on a certain difficulty, etc., etc. But as far as the first boss is concerned, the patterns are pretty fair. I take one death on there and I get right through them. But you can clear this game in basically like 14 minutes, I think the entire capture was. And I will put up my full gameplay capture after the season is over so you can check it out if you want to. But I definitely recommend this game. It is a ton of fun, and is one of those games, if you're into shmups, you definitely should play it. And if you're not into shmups, it is challenging enough to give you a good time, but not so hard that you're going to walk away. It's not like one of those cave bullet hell games where within 2 minutes you're completely frustrated and you never pick it up and play again. Nor is it something that's so easy that you just feel like it's not much of a challenge. It's a really good middle-of-the-road shmup game that gives you enough pushback that you really need to learn the patterns and learn how to play well, but not so hard that you're going to just be completely beaten up and get discouraged and want to quit pretty quickly. Now that we're on to the second boss here, you will see that we get some of those bullet hell sort of patterns, and then we have those lasers coming in from the side. I do take my first continue, but the patterns are good. I like them. They're organic sometimes, and then they're otherwise rhythmic and pattern-based other times, so you get a good mix of trying to avoid patterns and then trying to just navigate through something, as I failed there, to be able to continue and play. And then when you do die, you get enough power-ups so that you're not going to go completely back to a base ship and have a really difficult time actually continuing in the game. Although clearly I'm having a really difficult time here. It is hard to capture some of these at the same time as playing them, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm not the best at them. But really in general, I'm not the best at shmups. Although weirdly, cave bullet hell games, I'm actually pretty good at those. I think it's just down to being able to take a look at the patterns and just get in the zone and play them. But now that we're on to the third stage, we're in this kind of canal sewer area, and you get a nice background color palette, and I would say that the use of color in this game is really effective. The bullets don't really get obscured behind any of the sprites, and that sometimes is my complaint in shmups, is that sometimes the projectiles from your enemies can be hard to see. But you do get those power-ups. You see I got a little bit of trouble there with those shots coming down, and you just pop a power-up off, and then you're immune to the bullets and they clear the screen for that little bit of moment in time. What I want to let you do now is just listen to some of the soundtrack, because I think it is quite good. It's one of my favorite parts of the game. And I will come back in just a minute and we'll talk more about Batrider. Still don't know why it's called that. I could probably look it up, but it still wouldn't make any sense to me. And we'll just kind of close out the video. But enjoy the gameplay, enjoy the soundtrack, enjoy that death, and I'll be back in just a second. and the boss is dead. So if you're ever looking to pick one of these up, it runs on the Toaplan version B PCB, which is a Motorola 68000 based arcade board. And that processor was in so many arcade boards, it's not surprising that Toaplan used it as well. But on that same platform, you have obviously Batrider, which you're looking at now, you have Battle Garega, Truxton 2, and a bunch of other amazing shmups. Although if you do want to collect them, you are going to pay the price because none of those games are going to be cheap. So if you're a huge fan of the genre and you feel the price is appropriate, I definitely recommend picking Batrider up if you can find a copy, because it would go great in a Japanese, candy cabinet. But if you don't want to pay the price, emulating it is a perfectly acceptable alternative, because as far as the quality of the emulation is concerned, everything sounds like it should. There's no real graphical glitches. You hack up an Xbox One pad or an arcade control stick, and you're going to be playing the game like it was a cabinet right in front of you. Because unless you go to a really specialty arcade somewhere in the US, or if you live in Japan and can kind of pop into the arcades there, I don't think you're ever going to see this game. But you do owe it to yourself to check it out, because it is one of my favorite shmups as far as, this type of genre is concerned. Not a bullet hell game. I think it's an absolutely outstanding game that you definitely do want to play. And that is kind of par for the course for so many of the unported shmups, is that they're all great games, and they just never had a chance to get released to a home console. Because in '98, you could have put this on the Dreamcast and it would have worked perfectly fine. I would assume it would run on something like the PlayStation 1. I think it had the graphical power to be able to pull that off. But honestly, there were so many games that were 3D is what people wanted to play in '98, that the amount of shmups that came out on the Dreamcast is impressive in its own right, and it's not surprising something like Batrider didn't get ported over to something like the Saturn or even the Dreamcast, although it is disappointing that that didn't happen. We should be happy with what we did get versus what we didn't get. And now we're on to round 5, the Highway. I like that they put a space in there versus just being Highway. But I do love this particular song as well, so I'm going to just stop talking for 30 seconds so you can hear it, and I'll come back and close out the video, but you do want to hear the soundtrack as it is great in this spot. Now, I know when you talk about shmups, the soundtrack isn't the first thing that always comes to mind. It's always the gameplay, the bullet patterns, and the overall setting, but I do think that the game has such a great soundtrack that it really just goes to add a lot more flair to the presentation on board. Now, I do love the fact that story-wise, this is supposed to be on an island 2 miles away from Manhattan, although on that highway you have palm trees, so I'm not sure if they weren't familiar with the Northeast, is where I grew up, but we don't have a lot of palm trees up there, so I think that's just a fun little touch. Kind of has like a backstory of Escape from New York, where there's a prison island where they're trying to move the worst of humanity. I will say this boss gets much more challenging as you go through, although the pattern is fair. You have that large area in the middle where you're able to effectively avoid that bullet cascade, and then you get this more organic missile attack, which I definitely die to. But I definitely highly recommend you go out and at least emulate this game, because if you're a fan of shmups and you haven't played it, you absolutely should. And if you're just getting into the genre, it's deep enough to have fun, but not so challenging that it's going to just totally beat you up completely. But that is Armed Police Batrider, at least the first 5 stages. Now there are 2 more, but based on the realm I was playing, this is the game that was selected for me, so you get to see the first 5 and the credits. Short of that, really appreciate you guys watching. If you could do us a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe. It takes us a lot of time to make each one of these videos, but we will be back on Tuesday with another episode in our mainline entry, as well as Friday with another tech video, and we will be back on Sunday with another one of my favorite arcade games that was never ported to home consoles. Short of that, hope you guys enjoyed it. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the credits. Bye-bye.